All right, folks, we're looking at a 50-point system for X-Wing, with X-Wing miniatures, the miniatures game. And before I do another detailed deep dive with Narkexe and Liam, where we talk about kind of the factions, the breakdown of the individual points, I wanted to just do some real quick deck building as a quick primer, excuse me, not deck building, squad building, to talk about my process and exactly where I'm at, kind of adjusting to the 50-point system. So I'm in Scum, my personal favorite faction, and whenever there's a points update, even a minor one, the first thing I do is I take these squads that I love to fly and see if they're still viable. Check them out, see what I can do there. And then the second thing, of course, is to see what things you can do in the new points that were not possible in old points. So right out of the gate, my first ship is going to be my very favorite pilot, and that is Ketsu Onyo in the Lancer. And you'd think I'd be able to find this thing faster. There we go. It's alphabetical. This is Yasby 2.0 or Yasby 2.5. Shout out to Rathos, the developer of this, and how awesome this program is. And I do use Launch by Next to the app by Andre Lind on my phone. That's also really nice to have. I prefer that mobile experience to Yasby's, but I like having both. And being able to save this so it's on the computer and the phone is really nice. I think you can do that with Launchpad too, but I find the web interface of Yasby just, I enjoy it more. So the Lancer and then Ketsu herself, the pilot, coming in at 16 out of your 50 squad points. She comes in at about a third-ish. Um, yeah, so if you did three 16-point ships, you'd have 2 points left over. So, right? I can't click. Oh, yeah, there we go. 6 points left over. But you can do three. So that actually is pretty significant. Oh, that's weird. Hang on. Oh, but it won't. Oh, okay. It won't let me clone the named version. So it would have to be, yeah, hang on, we'll add that. So we add forward that. So it would be, yes, 2 points left over. Okay. And then the reason that I like Ketsu so much is I love the Lancer because if you look at this dial, it's a large base ship that's fast. I love that. That brings me back to the heyday of first edition, just because the Lancer and the Jumpmaster were dull back in the day. If you didn't live those moments, like it was pretty fun. Their dials are crazy for big ships, and that's been significantly nerfed, but they still have the three hard blue on a large ship and only one red maneuver. Being that fast is super cool. Coming in at I5 is really nice. Also having that base three and the turret that you never rotate is nice too. But also this bonus of the Shadowcaster title. We'll talk about that in a second. But this ability where she can just give out tractor tokens. Um, Pre-objectives, that was really helpful to hit really challenging ace ships that were hard to pin down and catch. I use this as a bit of a crutch to catch them and deal with them and also just move them around the board. Post objectives, there's actually a lot of strategy in that because if you track your small base, you can move it, potentially keeping it from scoring a key objective. So you have a ton of tactical control potentially, in addition to that offensive control too. And now with the changes to scoring in the 50-point squads, with squads, combat being a bigger part of the game, smaller squads and more aces. Ketsu is more able to move around the board because squads are generally going to be smaller, we're told. And then also she's going to be more powerful because there are going to be more aces around. And they will be tougher to pin down because they're going to have that extra mobility. So I'm still reaching for Ketsu as a go-to pilot, both because I usually do and really enjoy flying her, but then also because I think she's going to be really strong in current meta. And she got 15 points loadout. So my personal favorite build for her is this weirdness, which actually is slightly buffed. We'll look at that in a second. And then the modification I like on her is optics because she is Mandalorian. Now, having only the single upgrade slot is a bit tough, so she doesn't get access to Beskar. But because she's a large base, she spends a lot more time in arc outside of that, outside of her forward arc, which shuts off Beskar. So I like optics to really emphasize her offense. I like clan training, so she has the option to do a target lock and then turn that into a free focus. Also, it combos really well with her ability, where if she does end up bumping something, she still can tractor it and then get a focus and then nail it at range one. So like clan training is really, really good for her, just in general. And it's 1 point. It was nice. Then also she has access now to FTC, your false transponder codes. I don't think there's a one. Yeah, not shot. There we go. So this build is actually considerably buffed over the one I've used before because I really personally enjoy that clan training optics combo to give you the free focus lock regardless of what action you do. But then with grief, you can focus lock and then also, well, okay. So you get the free lock and then you can use grief to coordinate another ship and give that ship a target lock on the target in addition to whatever you coordinate. So you can double mod other ships at I5, which is incredibly powerful. And that's why I really like it, because she's good enough on her own. She doesn't need the double actions, but getting the free lock opens up Reef, and you get to use both Getsu and Grief. So that's our tangent there. But looking at this, the typical squad mates I tend to want to put with this, I really like being able to do Boba Fett. And custom Boba, I do think is buffed considerably. But since we're being efficient with points, I'm using Armed and Dangerous Boba. And this is the first thing that I reached out to build at our 50 squad point cost. Both I5, both hyper aggressive. Boba really likes target lock, so combos really well with that Grief build. So this is a list that I really, really wanted to build. And this right here, I love this list already, but this is where I hit a bit of a wall personally in my building. So I always lean for a 4 point or a 4 ship squad. Even now, even with reduced squad sizes, my squads were already on the small side, where a 4 ship will be kind of on the higher side now, but I've got 16 points left. And I've had a really hard time finding something that I really want to build here because I can reach straight for our cheapest ship. So I can reach for a 6 point generic that actually has loadout, which is nice, which leaves me with 10. And then we're looking at, I think I can do yeah, okay. So this is an okay 4 point, 4 ship, excuse me, where I've got a generic Fang in there running around. But I cannot reasonably do 2 ships at the level I want them to be. So if I'm looking at 2 ships, I'm looking at 2 7 point ships. And this is where I had a really hard time. Finding 7 point ships is tough. Let's see. So a base generic Y-Wing is one of the options. And then if I remember correctly, yeah, so like a generic Hawk starts there. So, well, I guess I have 8. So I can go up to 8. But still, this is where it was really tricky. Where filling in the gaps with the 50 points has been very challenging for me because the base ship cost is so high. And now having Boba and Ketsu, like 2 very strong I5 named pilots, like really, really frightening pilots in this list already, and still being able to build to 4 is cool. But this is the part that so far I've banged my head against the most, feeling kind of limited here. Um, so let's see if I bump both of these up to 8s. See a couple squads I can build in here. And I'm just going to go ahead and I can't do a Fang because their minimum is 10. Um, and that's tricky too, because if I want a Fang in here, I can't do Old Terok. I can't do anything bigger. And let's actually look at that, because if I do Old Terok, which is the first thing I reach for because these are both I5, I have 4 points left. And this is tremendously awkward for me because I can do this. I can have a really aggressive all I5 3 ship list. This is the list I actually want to run. Or I can bump him up to, but I can't, there's literally nothing I can do with 4 points. There's nothing I can do with 4 points except maybe the escape. Yeah, okay. So I can do an autopilot drone for 3. You know what? Let's save that. We'll save that autopilot drone. I actually kind of enjoy this. Uh, but that's where I'm having the most trouble is that at the 50 point scale, your base minimum number, I personally feel like there should be some sort of 4 point option. Um, which doesn't necessarily make sense, but trying to think about the other metas we've built in, you've had like a really, really cheap option. Ideally, a cheap named option is one of the things that we saw a lot. It was one of my personal favorite metas, is where we had like Bosk in the Z95. And of course, that meant that almost every single list had Bosk, the named Z95, in every single squad. But that wasn't the worst problem to have. And this issue here is also unique to Scum, because I don't think any other faction out there has a 4 point, let alone a 3 point. But let's test myself on that. So we're going to save this. Um, and I'll come back to build out Old Terok. I have a build for him, but I actually really love this. Old Terok plus Ketsu is devastating. If you can line up those ships, if you can line that up so you get Terok's debuff plus Ketsu on something, plus Boba taking things down, like you're going to utterly murder the ships that you hit. You have to hit them. And it's high risk, high reward. Boba and Ketsu are both quite durable. And then Old T is cheap enough that I think he can get away with being a little bit more fragile. But yeah, and then the escape craft to just bully stuff and do who knows what until it blows up. But giving up those 3 squad points spread away it's fun. I like it. But now we're going to load another squad that I had before, just to look at some of these. So I did finally do a 3 ship, and that's Ketsu with Armed and Dangerous Han. That's actually a really scary 3 ship, and that's something else you can do with the extra, 14 points that I had? Um, it is 16 points that I had? No, 15. Yeah, 16. So yeah, Han Solo, Armed and Dangerous, the X-Wing Alliance standard loadout is a pretty terrifying option. Then I did something like Boba plus Cavill, Dirge, and Sunny. I've just sort of mucked around with this quite a bit. I did do a Drea generic swarm, and you may have noticed right away there that the generics are noticeably cheaper pilots than the other options. Like your named options do get dramatically expensive really quickly, which I do appreciate generics being the cheaper option, but I am concerned about them being kind of the go-to default option. I mentioned that before, and that has come up somewhat in my list building as well. Um, and I did pull off a four ship with I5s in Scum, and I actually really enjoyed this one too. These are some of my favorites. So you can do some pretty scary stuff. And then here, there's another Boba Ketsu I built before that was more or less the same, but I ended up on Tor Fun in the Fang and a Mining Guild Sentry as the extra ship because that's actually a meaningful ship that barely fits in with your extra points left over. So let's load this. Yeah, we can discard the. I can rebuild that. I'll see if I remember that. I recorded this in a video. I will remember that. So 11.5 was able to fit in to get to exactly 50 with these two pilots, and it's fine. I do like Tor getting the bonus attacks being a really helpful way to make up for this being a very small list, and I'm excited to flat. But then looking at some other factions, yeah, there were a couple things that I'm a little concerned about, and this is a big one. So, on the subject of generics and following up, what I did in the beginning was try to build the list that I wanted to fly with pilots I know well and am familiar with and see what I could build with them. So, with that Ketsu 4 ship, with that Boba list, that's what you saw me do there. Then the other piece I mentioned is to look at what you can do with what you can do that you couldn't do before. And this is a 5 ship list with generic Jedi. You're looking at a bunch of Adas, so they're really, really squishy, but Auto Blaster, HLC, this is a gnarly list, a gnarly generic list, and these are going to be really tough to deal with. Even these Jedi generals being their little like 3 hull, 0 hit point, but they've got 2 recurring force. They have a base 3 attack die, a 3 die attack gun, um, and they can be quite scary. And especially running around with those auto blasters, these are a nasty customer. Especially since Yoda having battle meditation can coordinate 2 of them. While you perform a purple coordinate action, you may coordinate one additional friendly non-limited ship of the same type. Both ships must perform the same action. So you got Yoda flying with the auto blasters guys, and you say, "Here, have a target lock." Um, yeah, that makes them quite scary. And actually, I wonder, can I go up? So I will say you can't do auto blasters and marksmanship. That would be a nasty combo. And so that's well, actually, I can, can't I? No. So instead of brilliant evasion, I could swap to marksmanship. Can I not do marksmanship? Yeah, let's actually do that. That's better. We'll go ahead and build this. So then you have semi-spam of marksmanship, auto blasters, Jedi generals throwing, what is it? It's still 3 dice. Yeah. If defenders in your bullseye roll one additional die and they cannot cancel crit results if you manage to arc dodge, which you probably can with the Actus, even with the I3 generics. Yeah, or I4. Wow. So this is the kind of list that I'm concerned about, basically. And I know the XWA will do like update, they'll do quick updates, they'll check in on this. They're going to be watching for things exactly like this. But generic spam coming back to the game is something I am not looking forward to. And it remains to be seen whether it's actually stronger than named pilot spam or, well, not named, but it remains to be seen if it's more powerful, even competitive versus named pilots. But that you can do this is worrisome. And this actually, another case I didn't notice in the beginning is that Yoda's the same cost as the generics. And I like having a reason to take Yoda. I like that he's cheap, especially in the Ada 2, which is such a high risk platform. Um, but this kind of list worries me rather a lot. So this can put out a lot of damage really, really quickly and be tough to deal with and tough to pin down. And there's at least 2 force in every single ship in this list. Um, yeah. But again, this is something you couldn't do before that you can do now, assuming you can find an ADA. 5 ADAs is probably something you're going to see a lot more online than in person because I don't even have one, and this is asking for 5. But yes, so this is something I was able to see. On the flip side, though, you can do something similar with double named pilots here. Oh, I should have saved that. That's okay. I'll remember that. A little Torrent spam. This I actually like. This is the kind of spam I actually enjoy. Having your like nameless swarm of torrents. This is the kind of thing that I like to see. Because what we've seen, if I think Republic, one of the first meta pieces that I think of is your arc spam. We had triple named arc 170s sitting in the middle of the board, and the list could go, I think, up to six with up to three other ships. That was a pretty awful meta moment, just because all of those things were so affordable together. And that gave Republic a really, really strong advantage at a time when the faction as a faction was in kind of a tough spot. But it was super unhealthy for the game. And it really showed how powerful objectives were. It showed how powerful these named pilots were. And it showed that just like parking in the middle of the board was a really challenging strategy to beat. Like it was really hard to beat that with most lists in the game, unless you specifically tacked to deal with that, which made you more vulnerable to other meta lists out there. That was, yeah, exactly. So anytime I think about a meta change, like how does this go towards or away from arc spam? Because that's kind of one of the most negative pieces. And how does it go towards or away from like the Fat Han era where you had, or the double tapping on era we had more recently? If you played the game long enough, you have lived through an era where Han was a problem in the game somehow. Then this is Rebel Han being able to shoot twice or do something crazy. Uh, yeah. So those are kind of the things that I worry about is your beef spam. And I appreciate the restricted list helping with that because having the restricted list prevents you from doing the thing like the a wall of YV666s or nothing but generic Rebel Falcons. All that stuff that's there just for chonk and doesn't actually really play the game and just kind of shuts out down other lists just by being what it is. Those are the kind of metas you're always trying to sort of balance and avoid. And I do think that the 50-point system has some points I'm concerned about just because of how the points are balanced now. And again, first attempt, whatever. But I just wanted to kind of talk up some of the things that I've been building, a little bit of the thought process behind it. And I'm going to talk about these a little bit more in the context of everything else too. Uh, when I meet up with Liam and Narkexi again to kind of do a deep dive on the lens. I would love to hear what lists you're building, kind of what we're seeing more. I know there are a couple active tournaments going on, and I am diving into the lists being built now at the 50 points, but it's still so new. There's so much that we can talk about that I'm still just barely banging my head against it. Let's see some other lists I have built. I think I have some rebel lists too. I don't. See if I have. I do have separatists. Yeah, gauntlets are potentially incredibly scary because a lot of them come in at that 16 to 15 point cost mark, which makes them really, really efficient for what they bring to the table. And HMPs, yeah, okay, we can do a lot with this. Let's see what else I have. That was resistance. I do have rebel things built. Yeah, okay. These were fun. I actually really like what I'm able to do with some of the rebel lists. So this is a chunky beef, like a really aggressive thing. And seeing I6s incentivized, like Hera is in a really good spot. Hera in the B wing, I personally think, is in the strongest spot she's been since I have been playing the game. She's always been good, but now she comes in at an approachable price point. Like she's costed close to a large base, which is a problem. But there's a ton of loadout to make her hit really hard. Um, yeah, and here with like the auto relocking proton torpedoes, like that's pretty good with that weapon systems officer. Um, yeah, yeah. So you perform the attack, use your lock to reroll, and then you can get a lock back on that target. Like that's really good, especially in a meta where there are going to be fewer ships on the board. Like she may be incredibly dangerous. And then of course the VCX is always scary. Um, yeah, let's load another one. And then we'll stop talking. I know I'm just kind of chattering at this point. I want to go through this a little bit more detail with folks who will actually challenge me on this so we can really have a back and forth. So I'm looking forward to doing that. But I did want to do a check in and talk about like the current state and the things that I am enjoying or the things that I'm struggling with. And Tycho here, like custom Tycho being like Daredevil, Predator, Proton Rocket, Tycho, that's fun. I really, really like this build. I miss the HLC, but I do honestly like this better. Um, and I think Tycho was famous for having prockets in some previous metas, so this is a frightening, frightening thing that you're able to do here. And then I still just really like Wedge. But Wedge in an A wing with cluster missiles and juke, that is kind of a frightening thing. I'm mildly concerned about that. Although cluster missiles are going to be less powerful with fewer ships on the board. So yeah, we'll see. Snapshot West. Yeah, I actually really, really like this one. And this is a 5 ship list that's got A wings, X wings, and Y wings in it. Like that's feels good. Anyway, that's it. We'll keep it short. Let me know what you're building. Cheers.